Julian Milkis – канадський кларнетист, одесит у третьому поколінні. Навчався музиці в США. Юліану Мілкісу випала честь бути єдиним учнем короля свінгу Бенні Гудмена та улюбленим виконавцем композитора Гії Канчелі. Музикант співпрацював з оркестрами Канади, Франції, Південної Кореї, України. Виступав у престижних концертних залах світу, зокрема в Карнегі-Холл, Рой-Томпсон-Холл, в Лінкольн-центрі. З початком широкої війни Юліан Мілкіс підтримує Україну благодійними концертами. Вітаю глядацьку аудиторію телеканалу «Новий Чернігів». Це програма «Імпреза». Наш гість – канадський кларнетист, відомий як шанувальникам класичної музики, так і шанувальникам джазу. А ще він справжній друг України – Юліан Мілкіс.
Pleasure to be here.
Вітаю вас.
Thank you for inviting me.
Чому ви вирішили безпосередньо приїхати в Україну і тут допомагати нашій країні, Збройним силам, своїми благодійними концертами? Адже це ви могли і зробити у себе вдома в Нью-Йорку, організувати також благодійні концерти.
Well, it's a decision that just came to me in the middle of the night. That I think it was in April, that I woke up in the middle of the night and I felt I had to do something. And what could I do? I couldn't go fight. I couldn't do anything but play music. So I called a friend of mine. She's a journalist, also from New York, but she went to Odessa and she got stuck there. Yulia Gorodetska. And I said, could you organize some concerts? And we'll get the money. You don't need to pay for my flight, for my hotel. I'll do it on my own, and we'll try to raise money and donate it to the armed forces. She did that. So I went June 25th. I arrived. It was still, Odessa was still pretty empty, and first concert was at the Opera Theater, and then we played another one in the underground concert hall, which is a very old one, and it was very safe there because it's deep underneath. And the response was fantastic. The first concert was for soldiers, for officers, for medical staff, for volunteers, and for wounded soldiers. And the second was just for normal audience, and the response was amazing. People started recognizing me and crying and shaking hands and thanking me, and it was very touching. And I did a lot of interviews, both on television and for newspapers, and so it was just a start. I was there for 3 weeks.
Чому саме Одеса? Місто, в якому ви давали перші концерти вже під час війни в Україні.
Well, I was born in Odessa, and my parents and my grandparents, they're all from Odessa. And my mom and my father studied at Stolyarski Music School and then Odessa Conservatory. And my father started performing with Odessa Philharmonic. I was going there maybe every 3-4 years with my parents to spend the summer. So I knew Odessa very well. Hobart Earl, the music director of the Philharmonic, he invited me for the first time in 2006. And then right after that, it was regular. It was every maybe 2 years, and then every year. And I played not just with Odessa Philharmonic, but with chamber orchestra, with piano, all kinds of projects. And also I played in Kiev several times, and then Kherson with different orchestra. So when I decided that I have to come to Ukraine, the choice was very easy, that it has to be Odessa.
Як ви відкрили для себе Чернігів?
Well, Chernihiv, I have a couple of friends who are businessmen, and they invited me to a trip on a yacht in Malta. I played as a soloist in Malta with an orchestra, and they happened to be there. It's Nika Viknyansky and Anton. He asked me in February when I was in Odessa for the second time. He said, I'm starting to help classical music and just the cultural scene in this wonderful city, Chernihiv. And I said, would you be interested? Do you know of the city? And I said, of course I know of Chernihiv. It's a legendary place. It's so full of culture and it's so old that I would love to be there. I would love to. So he said, okay. And it's even more beautiful and better than I expected, because it's not just the beauty of the city, and the orchestra is wonderful, but it's the people. Everybody is so nice and hospitable, and I wish I understand Ukrainian now, but I wish I could speak better, because I really I don't know if it's the right word, embarrassed, but I don't feel comfortable speaking Russian here because of the war. So with time, and I hope to be back a lot, I'll improve, and hopefully I'll answer without the translator.
Будучи в Америці, в Нью-Йорку, ви пропонували комусь зі своїх колег, музикантів, відомих музикантів, можливо там, в Америці, в Канаді, приїхати також в Україну і виступити з благодійними концертами. Якщо так, то можете не називати прізвище, але чи є такі музиканти?
I've been doing it since day one. I'm screaming until my throat hurts in Europe and Canada and the United States that please come and play here, that they don't only need tanks and bombs and airplanes and soldiers. They need culture, they need music, because it heals the heart, heals the soul, especially when people are getting killed every single day and the structure is being destroyed, the cities are being destroyed, and little kids are being left without their parents. It's heartbreaking, and so far I will not name people, but they promised yes he will come, but so far nobody came. I played, it's my third trip, but I believe that people will start coming, because they understand that it's important. It's important. But the most heartbreaking situation for me was playing in Odessa hospital for wounded soldiers without legs and arms, and this is difficult to describe. I mean, it literally broke my heart.
Давайте поговоримо про творчість. Чи стрімко ви зробили кар'єру музиканта за кордоном, в Канаді? Ви спочатку ж були в Канаді. Чи відразу все вам вдалося? Чи, можливо, ви йшли до міжнародного визнання поступово?
It's a very good question. I'm really against children who go to stardom very quickly, and then most of the time, by the time they're 25, they evaporate, because in your career, when you perform, it's not enough to just play great, because especially now there's so many young kids who are fantastic, but you have to have something to say. So you have to be educated and cultural and well-read and know life and theater and other music and many aspects. And if you just know how to play your violin or piano or clarinet, it's not enough, because pretty soon you'll be empty, you'll have nothing to say. So in my case, I'm very happy that I was never like a wonder child, wunderkind. I was just a normal kid. I loved playing football and being on the street and fishing. And when I grew older, I chased beautiful girls and, drank wine with my friends and watched sports. So just a normal kid. So my career really started after I was 20, and it really started to move fast after I was 25, when I played at Carnegie Hall. It didn't start in Canada, by the way. It started in the United States, and then Europe, and then it was all together. Whenever I hear, you gotta hear this little kid, she is so amazing, she's 9, and I said, I don't want to hear it, because I'm worried about her well-being. So, and there are many examples, I will not say the names, that kids who promised the sky, they promised the world, and they didn't materialize. International competitions. Very often a young kid, a young girl at 18 or 19, they win a gold medal of a huge competition. And managers are like sharks. They grab that person and throw 100 and 120 concerts. And the person is not ready, doesn't have enough repertoire, and you have to slave away. You have to just practice between concerts, fly. You have no life. You can't read. You can't have a boyfriend or a girlfriend. You can't go to museums. You just go from one city to next, and you practice, and then very often they have a nervous breakdown. And the most fantastic example was a fantastic violinist in 60s and 70s. He was amazing, and he had to play 100 concerts a year, and he was very gentle. And at one point he said, I can't do it, and he ended up in a psychiatric hospital, and he was there for maybe 2 or 3 years, and then he got well, and he came back, and he called all those managers, and they said, now I'm ready. He was like 35, and they said, too late, we don't want you. And he jumped out of a window and killed himself. So it's a very, very touchy subject.
Стрімкий ріст кар'єри музиканта – це завдяки королю свінгу Бенні Гудмену, знайомству з ним.
Well, it was also a chance, really. At my lesson with my regular teacher, who, by the way, taught me everything. Later I found out that Benny Goodman took lessons from him also. And at the lesson, he said that I was in a concert yesterday and Benny Goodman was there. And he said he behaved really badly. There was a clarinetist there and he didn't like her. And he got up in the middle of the concert, everybody saw him. And with a very obnoxious face, he left the hall. And I started asking questions. I had no idea he lived in New York. And he said, yeah, he lives, not far from here. And I said, do you think it's possible to play for him? And he said, no, don't be ridiculous. He hates colleagues. He doesn't like other clarinetists. He's very closed. He doesn't let anybody near him. And he's just pretty obnoxious. I told this story so many times. I'll make it short. I got in touch with him. He called me back, and he invited me to his apartment. So, and I went to see him the next day, and that's how it started. And especially those 2 months before Carnegie Hall were very hectic and very active, and like sometimes it was 3-4 times a week. And second year it was just very few times. He was sick, he had an operation, and he was very depressed. And the third year it was again, back to seeing him quite a bit. I can't say that he helped me with my career, but a few times he called important people and he said, I have this young student who is very, very good and very talented, and you should invite him. And I was invited through him. And also the fact when people found out that he took a student, it was like a tremendous shock. And so some people, they couldn't believe it was true. And longer it goes, from the fact, now we're talking about 40 years ago, more important it gets in time. And also I started playing jazz really 10 years after he passed away, because at one of the lessons I asked him, Mr. Goodman, do you think I can play one of your small pieces as an encore, bis, encore? And he said, no, don't be ridiculous. You are very good at what you're doing. Don't go into my territory. I said, oops, sorry. And then after he passed away, people started asking me if I would play jazz. And I said, no, I don't want to be compared to him. And in time, I thought, maybe it's time. And it became, quite successful. I'm still, of course, a classical clarinetist, but I do love playing jazz, and now I play with some wonderful people. And his daughter just finished writing a book about her father, Rachel. So it's coming out pretty soon, and there's a big chapter about our relationship there. So I hope it'll be very interesting for people to read.
З Бенні Гудменом заочно ви познайомились, можливо, завдяки афіші концерту оркестру Бенні Гудмена, коли він в 62-му році гастролював в Радянському Союзі. І, зокрема, у нього було, здається, я читав 5 концертів в Києві в Палаці спорту. Ви йому показували цю афішу?
At that time I didn't have it. Later, when I started performing jazz, I remember once, I think in Boston maybe, an older person came to my concert and said, I want to present you, and gave me a program with Benny Goodman of 1962. That's very rare. And of course I have some memorabilia and some photographs, original. I have a photograph in Tbilisi with Benny Goodman in his swimming suit, surrounded by 5 KGB agents. And he had fun. He had a wonderful time, even though he had very difficult relationship with his musicians. They didn't like him. He was much older. He was, I believe, about 54, and they were all totally different generation and different way of playing jazz, like Zoot Sims and Bill Crow, huge stars, but really just starting in their late 20s and 30s. But the success was unbelievable. It was the first jazz musicians of that caliber from United States, and Benny loved success. He enjoyed being recognized. If we were on the street, and he was recognized immediately, and they would say, "We'll go, oh my God, Benny Goodman." He loved it. So, and yeah, he had memorabilia and programs and posters, and of course. Now his like unofficial museum is at Yale University. He has his clarinets and programs and music. It's all there.
Ви єдиний учень Бенні Гудмена, короля свінгу. Які він вам дав поради як музиканту, як людині? Можливо, ви ці поради розкажете, і вони будуть корисні нашим чернігівським, українським музикантам, які не мали такої нагоди спілкуватися з такою легендою, як Benny Goodman.
Yeah, he was very important for me. First of all, he changed my sound. And when I started playing with legends, like Dick Hyman, who is a bigger than life. He's still alive, he's 96. Actually, I just premiered the Ukrainian premiere of his ragtime concerto that he composed for me in Odessa. And he played with Benny Goodman since 1953. First time we played together, we just started playing, and he turned his head and he said, "Oh my God, you have Benny's vibrato." How come? I said, I stood next to him. All the lessons, he had the clarinet, and he didn't like to talk. If he didn't like something, he would show, he would play. So I had his sound in my ear. And he wasn't just a king of swing. The majority of classical clarinet repertoire of 20th century is written for him. Things like Bela Bartok and Aaron Copland and Malcolm Arnold, and he played premieres of Hindemith and Stravinsky and Bernstein, and he played with Toscanini and Bernstein conducted. I mean, it's unbelievable. And no clarinetist before him had such a career on stage. He taught me many very important things. The first thing is that do not depend on what critics write about you, because if you receive a terrible review, remember they don't understand anything. And if you receive a great review, don't let it go to your head. Just keep calm. And playing, he said, never play the same piece the same way. He said, even in classical music, you always have to improvise, like interpret it very differently every time. Because if you play it the same way, it becomes a routine, and that'll kill the music. He said, when you play music, never forget that the composer comes first. Your interpretation is secondary. You really have to follow the music, because if you start thinking that you are more important than the music, then you should leave.
Які видатні композитори довіряли вам свої твори грати першим, прем'єри їх творів?
Well, many now. I'll have to actually one day sit down and make a list. I mean, among the amazing composers, like geniuses, is, of course, Gia Cancelli and Moisei Weinberg and Oscar Moravec and Boris Tishenko. I have to sit down and make a list, but a lot of, and I had some programs that I performed music written for me. Once I told my mom, you know, I'm not afraid to die, because in a way, 100 years after my death, that concerto is written for me. So you become sort of a part of the world. Maybe to say immortal is too much, but in a way, yes, you are immortal because it's written, for you. That there are two fantastic, notorious clarinetists that nobody would ever remember them. One is Richard Mühlfeld. Johannes Brahms composed for him some of the most beautiful works, because he heard him once and he fell in love with his playing. Anton Stadler, we would never know of him, but Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart composed Kegelstadt Trio, so many clarinetists, and Benny, being a king of swing and an amazing jazz musician, so many classical great compositions were written for him that he is immortal just for that. So I'm so happy to be honored and thrilled to be a part of that little elite club.
Юліан, скажіть, з початком повномасштабної війни в Україні якось змінився ваш репертуар, який ви граєте на концертах по всьому світу?
Yes, absolutely. I never played Ukrainian music, and to my embarrassment, I didn't know much of Ukrainian music, because in Soviet times it was really suppressed. Not just Ukrainian, but all music like Armenian and Georgian, it was secondary. If you wanted to make it, you had to go to Moscow or St. Petersburg, Leningrad, and study there, and study composition there and performing, and very, very few people made it. And I knew of some composers. Of course, I knew of Valentin Silvestrov, but not so much his music. but his reputation, because since he was a very young man, everybody knew that this is a real genius. But I opened a lot of fantastic Ukrainian composers, and now I do sometimes program half of the program is American or European music, and half of the program is Ukrainian music, and it's wonderful. So and it'll grow, and some Ukrainian composers are now they connect to me and they write music for me, and most of the time it's very wonderful, it's very talented.
І на завершення нашої зустрічі я хотів би, щоб ви побажали щось чернігівцям. Які у вас за ці дні, які ви були в нашому місті, враження від людей, від самого міста, і що б ви побажали чернігівцям в ці важкі для нас дні?
I want to wish people of Chernihiv, not only Chernihiv, but Lviv and Kiev and Odessa and Ivanovo-Frankivsk and all places in Ukraine, the victory, and that the bloodshed stops, and that they win and drive back the monsters from Ukrainian land, and that instead of bullets and attacks on this wonderful country, you'll hear music. And I just pray that it's soon, because the price that this country is paying is just, it's too much, it's indescribable.
Дякую вам, Юліан.
Дякую вам.
Дякую вам, дуже щиро дякую. Я думаю, що ми не востаннє спілкуємося, зустрінемось обов'язково після нашої перемоги, і ви ще будете грати для нашої вишуканої, чудової чернігівської публіки.
I hope so. Thank you.
Thank you.